Good evening, everyone. I'm PennLive opinion editor John Micek. Over the last few weeks, Pennsylvania as a state has had some very candid and sometimes very painful conversations about race relations. We've gathered here together in our offices in Mechanicsburg, our usual reader panel. We're going to try to look at some of the issues that led to those incidents at a Philadelphia Starbucks and a York County Country Club. Well, for the next hour or so, we'll be talking about how to recognize the preconceptions in our own midst, the way we talk to and treat each other, and to try to find some constructive solutions forward. I'm joined tonight by Joe Robinson, the president of the Martin Luther King Leadership Development Institute in Harrisburg, an organization that trains the next generation of black leaders. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Joe.
Hey, thank you, John. And good evening to everyone. Tonight, I'd like to frame our discussion. I'm drawing from a book written by Ms. Kelly Brown Douglas, Dr. Douglas, the candid theologian at the Washington National Cathedral. And she wrote a book called Stand Your Ground back in 2015. And so to kind of frame what's been going on in society, as John alluded to, I'm lifting a quote from the book to put in context what we're talking about here tonight. And it simply reads this: free black bodies are guilty of something. They are guilty of trespassing into white space. Practically speaking, a free black body does not enjoy the presumption of innocence. It must always be guilty of something. Renisha, Jonathan, Jordan, and Trayvon were free black bodies in a white space. They were surely guilty of a crime. It was white space because white people occupied it. They had to be doing something other than asking for help or walking home or playing loud music. And so with that, we'd like to ask and talk about our own local issue here that most recently transpired.
Yes.
As it relates to free space.
We're lucky enough to be joined tonight by Sandra Thompson, the York County Attorney, head of the York branch of the NAACP, who had firsthand experience in that incident at Grandview Country Club. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes to have Ms. Thompson talk about her experiences, why she's here tonight, what she's looking for from tonight's discussion, and I promise at no point will we tell you to hurry.
Well, thank you for the invitation to come here and speak as a part of this panel and share with you our story. So, and that was an appropriate quote because we were are a group, Sisters in the Fairway. We're a group of African-American women predominantly who learn to love and enjoy the game of golf. And most people would know historically the game of golf have not been for African Americans, maybe Tiger Woods and others who have trailblazed. So we are all professional women who, that's also how we socialize, is through the game of golf and unwind. So we were having our season opening on April 21st of this year, and we had memberships. We were members at the Grandview Golf Club in York, Pennsylvania. And so we tried to go golfing, that's it. We just went to go golfing as 5 women. We got permission to play as a group of 5. We knew the rules and knew that 5 are not always welcome. So we asked to play as 5, they said yes. And we first encountered the starter and the golf pro who were very nice. And they had no problems with us or how we played. It was the owners. When the owners saw us on the course, when we were on this very second hole, they called the police and came out to us and interrupted our game on the second hole twice. And it was actually former County Commissioner Steve Chronister who identified himself as an owner, who we later learned was actually not an owner, but he was an operating manager. So he called the police on us on the second hole, told us basically he wanted to refund our money and our membership, so really he didn't want us as members. As African American women golfers, when we're on these golf courses, we eat at their restaurants, we purchase their clothing, the balls, the tees, we spend money. And so when he said that he wanted to refund our cart fees and our membership fees, he said our money was not good enough for him. And then by the 9th hole, 3 of the ladies decided to leave. They couldn't take it any longer. and two of us tried to play through, thinking there's no reason for him to come back to us. And yes, he did, with 4 other men, demanding that we leave their property immediately, and said that they called the police, and the police did respond, but thankfully they were professional. Finally, the gentleman behind us, and toward the end of the story, and during, spoke up for us that we were not what they accused us of being. We did not violate rules by being slow on the golf course. We kept the pace of play. We had not held them up. We were not loud black women. We were pleasant to them every time they encountered us on the golf course. So they made it very clear that they golfed immediately behind us. They were not complaining. It was solely the owners. So we were African-American women who were in was typically white space, and it was, when we golfed that day, there were all white males who were playing as well. Now there was in the restaurant, they were having some type of baby shower or something, so where it was predominantly white females as well. But at that day, at that time, we were only African-American women on the course, and we were not welcome.
All right. Thank you for sharing that story, and certainly it did make the news. I just want to, first of all, just say tonight, we want to have some candid conversation, okay? We don't want the cameras to threaten you. We want to be, we just want everybody to relax. We want this to be a free space. Because if we don't feel safe here talking about this, we'll never be able to get to some of the root issues in our community, in this issue of race. So just want everybody to take a deep breath, exhale, and just relax, because we're just going to have a conversation. We don't want it to be a divisive conversation. We want to learn from each other, because we all have a different perspective. And so we may just find out that, oh, okay, I didn't see things that way. Thank you for sharing with me. You've given me something to think of. If we all walk out of here just saying, okay, at least I've got another perspective to think about, you must not change my mind yet, then we will achieve our purpose here tonight. And so I just want you to approach everything that John and I will talk about tonight from that perspective. And so this notion of golfing, they were trying to golf, and you've often heard the term, at least in the African American community, we use the expression, driving while black, walking while black, etc. I'd like to ask anyone to talk about, first of all, do you think that there's any credence to that notion of doing X while black? And then also, those who perhaps may have never thought about that, if there's a counter view, if you say, well, I think that's overdone or over-exaggerated. I mean, feel free. Again, we're not here to argue, but we are here to learn and prove, okay? So that's what we're here trying to do tonight. So anyone want to take that? Oh, yes, sir.
Well, I want to provide a different perspective. I've been playing golf since I was 15 years old.
All right.
I started out caddying for my uncles. I had 2 uncles that played golf. And right now, I'm a PGA official.
Okay.
So I've taken it from just a pastime to a vocation, although I'm not a paid official. I'm a volunteer. I've worked several professional golf tournaments. I'm personal friends with Tiger Woods. So golf has, become my hobby and my life. This is the first time. On April the 21st, I was in Goodyear, Arizona. I heard about this incident. And not even knowing where it was, I thought it was in New York or whatever. I didn't know where it was until I got back home.
Mm.
And they said it was at Grandview. I played Grandview. I used to know the previous owners, who were the Warings, and they had the golf course up at Hagee's. So I'd known them a long time. So when they said the owners, I knew it wasn't the previous owners. I knew there had to be new owners, because they always catered to all races. But this is the first time I've ever heard of anyone calling the police because of slow play. I mean, the etiquette is you let the people go through. My uncle always told me, you should never be held up on a golf course because there's 18 holes.
Right.
Go do another hole. So I couldn't believe when I heard that this had happened.
Mark.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like, I don't know what golfing while black is like, but I know what golfing while white is like. I've played golf my entire life, and a couple of rules that I know. One is not to ask for special treatment or special accommodations. And the sisters in the fairway asked for special treatment. They wanted to golf as a fivesome. That violates the golf rules of the club, and it violates the United States Golf Association rules. A fivesome in and of itself is going to take too long to play. They're slower than a foursome. They're slower than a twosome. So right out of the gates, a request for special treatment was made, and it was granted. Now, I have golfed with 5 guys throughout my life. I've never golfed in a fivesome. I've always obeyed the rule. And you put 2 guys and 3 guys in 2 separate groups. So that's the first thing that I've learned from watching this incident. And the second thing I learned is, when Ms. Thompson was confronted by the ranger or the manager, she made it about race. She said the only thing that is different here with our group and the other groups is our race and our sex. But she was being admonished for violating the rule of playing too slow. And then on the turn, they were being admonished for violating another rule, taking more than 20 minutes on the turn. So there were 2 rule violations that were pointed out by the management. And that's the reason why they were asked to leave. So you have to play by the rules. I've been admonished many times over the years by rangers. And you play faster, you apologize, and you stick to the rules. And you don't insult someone by calling them a racist or a sexist. That just heightens the situation. It makes it more heated, and it makes it more difficult to resolve it calmly and coolly. And maybe that's why the police were called. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I think there were several missteps that were made by the sisters in the fairway on that day at Grandview Golf Club.
Okay,
Sandra, go ahead.
Okay. Rules are set by organizations, and I played for 6 years, which I'm sure is younger than some of the other guys who say, and we watched many people play as fives on multiple golf courses. It's not favored, but it's done quite often. And again, it's the organization determines whether you can and whether you can't. And had they said no, and we would have hidden and done it, then that would have been a rule violation. So playing as 5 with permission is not a rule violation. Also, we finished with 5 people, 9 holes in 2 hours. The pace of play was 4 hours and 15 minutes for 18 holes. So, which is why also the gentleman behind us said we never were too slow. So there's something that's called pretext, and it sort of also goes by your quote of where quite often, and I got admonished by this on Facebook. Sometimes I say white, sometimes I say Caucasian. I just interchange. Just like sometimes I say black, sometimes I say African American. So predominantly white people like to find reasons other than racism. And even sometimes with women who advocate for gender equality, they still want to, they will see that we were women and we were probably treated differently as women. But they do not want to cross that race line to say, well, yes, as a woman, you were treated differently because you're a woman. But they do not want to say you're treated different because you're black. They continue to try to make up rules that we violated, to continue to try to justify themselves. So there's no reason, again, for the reason why they call police on the second hole. If you're trying to say, well, we brought up race or something like that, and bringing up race, the fact that we are the only African-American women with a whole group of white males, and you're only talking to us and falsely accusing us, it's a fact. And unfortunately, a lot of white people don't want to believe that this is still an issue. And so they find excuses and want to victim blame. And I don't really like to say we're victims because we're not, I always say overcomers. But they would like to find you at fault versus holding the people accountable. And that's just something we continue to face, and we will continue to face. As long as people won't accept it, there's not going to be progress.
Okay, I think rather than have our two attorneys continually litigate the the golf cart fan, I think what the broader point Joe was driving at a couple of minutes ago is the experiential part of this. Golfing whilst black, driving whilst black, shopping whilst black. And Claude, you and I, we've known each other for a while. You work with young people on the Hill, and no doubt you talk to them about this stuff. I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Well, kind of key in what you're saying. The issue I have with what happened was as soon as the police brought in, okay, I'm going to go back and say what municipal code was violated, what Title 18 code was violated to cause the police to be brought into the situation. I'm glad the police acted in a professional way, saying, excuse me, this is a private matter. They are members.
Right.
Because they're members, we have no jurisdiction here. They did not violate any county code, municipal code, or state code. So this is a private matter. They need to resolve it privately. Going back to what you're saying, and dealing with the different youth that I have, and I think it is something that Joe said, and this happens in the part where I live. As soon as you get a group of children or a group of any minorities who invade a space that is predominantly white, okay, automatically I would say I wish I had a machine that could measure blood pressure, respiration. People their anticipation of something, a negative exchange happening is heightened. Well, if you're going into a situation where you're anticipating problems, you're going to have problems. That's what I look at. Most of the times the kids will transition through the area, and I always say sometimes live and let live. I did when I grew up. I transitioned to the area, and we didn't bother anybody. But again, and I don't know how to articulate it in a way that. And when I worked in New York, I had this problem. I walked down the street, and sometimes I wasn't dressed like this, and I would have people put their handbags and stuff close to them. And I once stopped and I said, I could probably buy you 2 times over. I don't need your money. Okay? It's that reaction, okay, because of the color of skin. We have to get beyond that. There is no invasion. I don't call it white space. It's public space. We have the right to transition anywhere in that space as long as we're not violating the law. Don't perceive a violation of the law. If an actual violation of the law happens, then you reach out and you let the authorities on that.
Second. Mike and then Carla, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to come at it from a different angle. I think a lot of it has to do with how you're raised and how you're brought up. I could tell 100 positive stories here tonight, but I'm not, because it would look like I'm ingratiating myself to a certain community. But what the hell, I'll tell one of them. I'm at
Of course you will.
1951, I was 11 years old, and I'm at a baseball game with my dad, and I've been a sports guy my whole life. And the Hartford Chiefs are in playing the Scranton Red Sox. And the George Crow from the Hartford Chiefs, first 2 times up, he hits a home run. There's people booing. And I said to my dad, why are they booing? He said, because they're stupid. And he gets up another time. He had 4 home runs in the game. By the time he hit the 4th home run, everybody was cheering for that. So it was a positive thing. And I'll regress back, it was all the way back till I was 5 years old. Can I speak
Go right ahead.
on this?
Yes, sure.
I'll be quick.
Please.
I was quarantined with measles in 1945, and my friends across the street, Claude and Jerry Brown, came over and stuck a card underneath the door. Get well, Mike, so we can hurry up and play, and you can use my fire truck. That stuck with me. Fast forward 73 years later. I have positive stories like that. And I think my interactions with people in the black community, or however they want to, on a scale of 1 to 10 or a 12. Now, that doesn't mean when you go into the political sphere and you go into other things where people take stances that we're all in agreement. But from a personal point of view, and as one of my black friends said, and I hate to use that term because it sounds like you're ingratiating yourself, but he said, Mike, it's all about economics. And I leave it with that.
Carla.
So where I continue to struggle is when police are called, when there's no physical threat, there's no imminent danger, there's no weapons present, and the police themselves say, there were no laws broken, this is not a police issue, it never was a police issue. And instead, we're asking women to justify, well, were you breaking a rule? Like, what were you doing? I've been on a golf course and I've seen drunken men whipping their shirts off and waving them in the air. And guess what? No police were called. It's not about, did you break a rule? Did you deserve to be held under suspicion or badly treated? It's about the idea that as soon as there's this opportunity or this lack of comfort, that black people are getting police called, which really does escalate a situation, when white people could be exhibiting the same behaviors, breaking rules or not. And right, and police are not called. And there's so much science. There is so much science and statistics and testimonies behind things like redlining and segregation. We have history from slavery and segregation all the way up into modern times, discrimination suits. We have proof that black people have historically not been equally treated in this country. And then we have plenty of studies where you send the same resume and it's Joseph and it's Jose with the same qualifications but a different name, and Jose does not get called. You know, Jaquan does not get called, John does. So we have all kinds of science that the prejudice, that systemic bias, it does make a difference between opportunities for people of color and for white people in this society. And then we still have black people saying, I go into a store to shop and the white customers are not followed, but I am. You know, if I need a question answered about chemistry, I ask a chemist. If I need a question answered about music, I ask a musician. If we need questions asked about what it is like to be black in America, we need to be asking and listening to black people. And I am struggling to understand how a white person who has never experienced what it's like to be black and to be followed or to be discriminated against, how can a person that's never experienced it, that can have no knowledge, say, well, that bias isn't real, that experience isn't real, you didn't really experience that. You can't do that. We have to be listening to people that this is their everyday reality and trusting that, because you can't drive while black. You can't golf while black and assume that you will be equally treated, because there are many great people and great spaces. But we don't have any protections and we can't guarantee a good space, so we have to be on guard at all times, which is stressful and exhausting, and it's real.
Okay. Mark, quickly, then I'd like to go to Cindy.
Yeah,
And then Mr. Mitchell will get to you.
I think the rule of law and the equal protection of the law is what is critical. I think that's how we get beyond racism, is if we apply the rules and the laws equally. And I just think the Sisters in the Fairways were asking for special treatment above the rule, above the law, and they violated the rules, and then they refused to leave. The club had every right to ask them to leave, and they refused, and that's what exacerbated the situation. The two black gentlemen in Starbucks were asked by the police 3 times to leave, and they refused, and that's why they were arrested. My wife and 4 children, who are very white, went to a Starbucks in Philadelphia next to Rittenhouse Square. My youngest had to go to the bathroom badly, but they were denied access to the bathroom until they made a purchase and got the receipt with the bathroom code on the receipt, and they take the receipt up and they plug in the code, and that's how they gained entrance to the bathroom. My wife didn't ask for special treatment or special accommodations. She followed the rule, and it was applied equally to my wife and my children, who are white. That's how we get beyond racism, where none of us ask to be treated specially or favored by the law.
We could probably lose an entire night up talking about equal treatment under the law, but I don't think we're going to go there quite yet. Cindy, for you, please.
There are a couple of different things. I mean, if we talk about the history of equal treatment, it hasn't been there. So that's a point that can be debated forever. The thing that I keep coming back to, that as challenging as the times are that we live in right now, the conversations that are happening are the thing that give me some hope for, there's not a clear pathway of how to resolve all of the issues that we are facing, but the fact that we are having these conversations, because I think growing up white, that's the context that I grew up in. I mean, I went to a school with one black person. As far as I knew, there were no Jewish people, there were no Catholic people, there probably were, but it was pretty much white Protestant. That was my context, you know what you know. And I think that until these conversations happen, and as uncomfortable as they can be, there isn't a hope for moving forward until we see the discomfort. And we're going to have to push up against those edges. People are going to have to say, this is real for me. And my hope is that there can be resolution that comes out of that in a way that is not harmful, that there's not more violence, that there aren't more black bodies being killed. So the point is being made, but the conversation needs to continue to happen, and I'm grateful. That's the one thing that I see that gives me any kind of hope, is that there are forums, that things are coming up in ways that they didn't, 30, 40, 100 years ago for sure.
Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Mitchell, and then to Cammie, and then to you, Tanya. So please go ahead.
I'll start here. I think there will always be race relations. Whether they're good or bad is the question. And the word that everybody seems to be dancing around is fear. At some point, those owners or someone at the golf shop was afraid and called the police. Because that's the only reason why you would call the police for something like this. What were they afraid of? You know, you're going to confront these 5 women and they're going to do something. Who knows what they're going to do? So we better call the police.
But at times, and as a black man, I hate to say power structure, they use the police as a controlling mechanism. It's an intimidation. When I'm, as a black man, when somebody calls a cop on me, I use police officer, they call, the police officer shows up, if it's a question between black and white, there's a presumption of guilt automatically assessed to me. And as a black person, we're taught, our life, we've been taught that. We've been taught that if an officer shows up, or you're somebody of power, shows up on you, okay, there's a presumption that you've done something wrong. We got to change that. That presumption is wrong, okay? Again, it may have been their right to, but I would look at that if I'm playing golf or out there and somebody, or at Starbucks, and they call police officers on me, and I have not broken the law, my attorney is going to come out very, very fast. Excuse me, you're using that to do what?
But you have to be alive for your attorney
I
to
know.
come in front of you.
But you're using that to do. But you're using that to do what? To intimidate me? Because again, the police and the power structure have been used to intimidate us throughout the century. Okay, and that's what we see. That. Yeah.
You said they called the police because they're afraid. What do you think they were afraid of, these 5 women?
Yeah, that's intimidation.
They called the police because
Okay.
they refused to leave the golf course.
Mark, Cammie's been waiting.
It's a function of power.
But they don't do that to white people. Fivesomes play there all the time. Even under the law,
I
equal
can't tell you how
protection
many
didn't happen.
people I've represented over the years, white people, who have been asked to leave restaurants, clubs, and premises, and if they refuse, the police were called and removed them. It's called defiant trespass. That's the crime in our crimes code. If you have no right or privilege to be on a premise and you are asked to leave, you must leave. Otherwise, you're committing a crime.
They had a right to remember.
The rules said they can be asked to leave if they violate the rule. They violated 2 rules. The rules that they belong to as a member said they could be asked to leave, and they have to leave if they violate the rules. That's what happened.
And they got an exception.
Right, they go with permission.
Okay, all right, I'm going to exert moderator's privilege here. Cammie's been waiting patiently.
Just to go off of what Mark said, they may have violated the rules, sure. I've gotten really drunk on a golf course because I think golf is really boring. So I eat hot dogs, and I generally wreck the cart. So I've been asked to leave. Now, however, whether or not they broke the rules of the course, I could see the owners asking them to leave for that, sure. But why call the police?
Because the ladies refused to leave. They would not remove themselves physically from the premises.
Now,
The only way you can remove them is to bring in the police.
I could see that.
That's what the police are for.
And our own staff reported that The police had never been called to the course for a previous offense like this. When the officers arrived, they determined no offense had occurred and had gone on their
Because
way.
no golfers had refused to leave before.
Well, see, and
But it's a
There have
private-
been many golf
All right.
courses where golfers have been asked to
Hold on,
leave and
Mark.
they've
Mark,
left.
Hold on, Mark.
That
We
doesn't
want to hear
matter.
from others too, but
Whether they've been called before or not, it doesn't matter. Whether they were black or white or not, it doesn't matter. The whole point was, sure, they were asked to leave, but this wasn't on the 9th hole. This was on the 2nd hole the police were called. So if you can give me any other reason that they were afraid or there was any other intimidation for the police to be called by the 2nd hole, when they haven't even been shown that they were slow of play or anything else.
May I
That
respond to that
to me
question
makes
is
no
directed to me?
sense.
And,
No,
but
I-
even beyond that, there's lots of times beyond these two incidences where there was no reason. You know,
Skittles and Mountain Dew.
yeah, you know, it was fear that generated, and I think that's the point. Get pulled over by a policeman, I do not shake, I do not worry that I mean, I might be worried that I'll get a ticket, but I am not afraid for any other reason. I'm not afraid.
And that is, and if I may, if that is where white privilege is shown at its best. Because when I think back, when the question was presented, what is it like walking while black, driving while black? The first time I was aware of my blackness was 5 years old at a pool, and a young white boy was with his white father. I was in Gettysburg, enjoying the pool, and he said, "Daddy," in a southern voice, dialect, "is that an N-word?" And I'm 5. I'm sorry, maybe 6 or 7. But I was aware, even at that young age, that that wasn't a nice word. And then I became aware of my blackness because it was pointed out. There are many incidences. I went to city school. I'm from the city of York. We had black students, of course, white students. At that time, it was over 50% white, 34% black, which maintains that till today. Went off to art school. A white young lady said to me, "Nice for a black girl." I was in a predominantly white class. I didn't understand that for a black girl. So what does my blackness mean to you? You know, what does it mean to, for me, when I'm okay and comfortable in my home, but the moment that I step out the door, what is my blackness, how is it perceived? And I am confronted with that every time, not every time, but there have been times when I walk into the store and I'm looked at, you can just feel it. Or if I'm not necessarily driving, because I do know that not all the time police look at black women as drug dealers, but I worry about my son, who's 26. I worry about my 13-year-old daughter, who's now not in a city school any longer, but in a private school. And she's the only black person in her classroom. I felt like I had to train her, had to coach her. This is how you behave now that you're in a predominantly white school. My son having an African name, and I felt like I had to name him an American white middle name in case, and I thought about this 26 years ago, that when he is an adult, that he wouldn't get judged by his first name because it's Khalil. His middle name is Alexander. And I did that so when I thought about 18 years in the future, when he applies for a job, that he can go by K. Alexander, that he wouldn't be overlooked because of his name sounds African. So this is what it feels like to put on, to know that you're black and have to walk in it every day. It's a heaviness that white privilege will never, ever, ever understand that, because we are cognizant of this daily. We worry about our children daily. I worry about my husband, who's prominent in the community. He's a dark-skinned male, he's a judge. But if he's in jeans and sneakers, they don't know that. If he's not walking around in his robe and a gavel, they don't know that. And I've seen pocketbooks be clutched. I worry about if he's alone on the elevator and a white woman comes on the elevator. It's a history, it's so systemic, the thought process, it's been ingrained from generation to generation to generation. So it's not like we're making this up or we're playing the race card. It's a real thing. It is real.
Pastor, I want to call you into this. We're trying to reconcile almost
two exclusive notions. On Sunday, many of us in this room will hit our knees and will be told we're all equal in the eyes of the Lord. But we are hearing something very different here this evening. How do you, I mean, when you're talking to your congregation, when you have to address these issues, how do you address that dichotomy?
I've been listening, obviously, to what you've all been saying, and I think that's my first job, is to listen to people and their experiences. Growing up in Gettysburg as a white boy, I was around some diversity in the town itself, but once you hit the county, not a whole lot. I was taught that if you were in trouble, you went to go find a police officer. You went to find them because that's your safety net. As I've been in York now as a pastor in the city for almost 4 years, I've been learning, intentionally trying to learn as much as I can about a number of different cultures in the city and experiences in the city. Asking a lot of questions, trying to participate in and be a part of different groups and organizations, and just hearing their stories and experiences. You know, mothers telling me that they teach their children to try your best to stay away from a police officer, and if they talk to you, stand still, don't move, yes or no, you know. I can have a conversation and not worry about it. Getting back to Sunday morning, I'm a pastor in Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We're the largest Lutheran denomination in the country, one of the mainline denominations, and we are also one of the whitest denominations, unfortunately. We grew out of German immigrants, you know, and other European countries, and we really held on to that. I have stories of the congregations that I served not that long ago that if you came in with the wrong color skin, you were told to go somewhere else. They didn't take the understanding of Christ that there's no difference in the eyes of God. But that doesn't mean that we talk about, you know, the whole blending or what's the melting pot thing. I don't believe in the melting pot either.
Don't forget that.
Because I believe God has given us the gift of diversity, and it's something that we celebrate. And we all have different ways that we experience God in our life based off of what our experience and upbringing in our life is. And if we only stay with the people like us, we only get that glimpse. But when we allow ourselves and we are intentional about learning and asking questions and talking and being part of different communities, we get to hear how God is active in their lives. So when we talk about on Sunday morning about diversity, we don't talk about it in a way that is, what are we losing by allowing others to share their culture? Instead, we talk about how are we gaining? How are we experiencing God in even greater and more expansive ways? And so that's, as a pastor, as a leader, as you know, as someone in the city of York, that's how we look at it, that we're able to gain and grow in our understanding of who God is and how God works because of the gift of diversity, and that our unity is in Jesus, and that's what really matters.
Vincent, you've been waiting, and then Dr. will go to you.
Let's see. The only two people who ever tried to kill me in my life were black people. That's fact. I was born in Washington, D.C. It's called Chocolate City, probably 90% black. I had a stone thrown. It hit me in the head in the back of our apartment complex in southeast Washington, D.C. before the King riots. Blood was coming down my face. I was scared. Whoa. Then people used to chase me home because I spoke white. Why are you trying to be white? Okay. I'm Vincent. My parents said, my mother was a teacher. My father was in the Air Force and intelligence. He spoke proper English. I was made to speak proper English. That's the way you get ahead. We read books when we were little. We didn't hang out in the streets. So we had to move. Oh, another guy came up to me with a baseball bat when I was 5 years old. And I wanted to wring his neck, but my mother wouldn't let me. Shortly after we moved, I was about 65, we moved and integrated a neighborhood. So I was never scared of white people. They called me black. I said, no, you're not black. My soul and my shoe is black. My mother told me, white people spend a lot of money trying to get your color. She said, you're Vincent and you can be anything you want to be. So that's how I grew up. Then I went back to Howard University to find out when I was talking to white people, black people would look at me with hatred. To find out why black people hated me on sight. So who was I? I was Vincent, hated by everything just about. 90% of black people would hate me. Then I went to Howard University. They said, you think you're such and such because you're light-skinned. I said, no, I think I can be something because my father told me I could be anything I could be. And I studied hard. Now, I work in global cybersecurity. Second generation computer guy, geek, and third generation veteran. So when it comes to you can't change things, when it comes to you can't walk down the street without having your life threatened. I got off of going 109 miles an hour. When I saw the cop, I had my hands up here and I just went, he got me for 86. I got a warning for taking a left turn I'm not supposed to. I just laughed. He came up to me and I said, you know what you did? I said, yes, I did. I was laughing. He let me off with a warning. I was not belligerent. I respected him. I didn't think he was going to hassle me. I went to him with love like a regular human being, and I wasn't threatened or shaking or anything. I love people. I don't care who they are. So this is a different experience, and maybe yours is different. But I live a life of peace. Nobody bothers me. Yeah, I protect myself. I've been in the Army, and I learned how to protect myself. And I'm an NRA instructor, certified instructor in rifle, pistol, and shotgun. I believe in taking care of myself and my family. But I do not live in fear. And praise God that I've had this type of life. And I wish that I could share that with you.
Doctor, we'll go to you next, then to Sandra.
One thing I've learned in my years is just because we don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And, but, you know, I'm a former pastor, and I wanted to go over something that this pastor had just said about the church and people in the church. There's a saying that the 11 o'clock hour on Sunday is the most segregated hour, you know, 24 hours, because people are in their own places. But I have a lot of stories, but I'm going to share one with me coming out, you know, being a former pastor when I was young and came out of college and went into my first position as an associate. It was in a 99.9% white congregation, and they wanted me and they accepted me in there, and the church was loving and kind. And but one of my jobs was to go and visit the sick and go to the nursing homes and to serve communion and, you know, those kinds of things. And I didn't realize that certain people were calling the senior pastor and saying, she can't come to my house. And I didn't know that was happening. I was happy-go-lucky, like you said, happy-go-lucky, and just living my life thinking that everybody loves me and I'm just the best that came along and I'm helping all these people. And then to find out behind the scenes, somebody saying, she can't come here, you know, and so the senior pastor, it was not her job, particular job, you know, she would have to make certain visits because, and I didn't realize until later, much later, that, and I said, oh no, I'll do that, that's my job. No, I'll do that. But there's a lot of stuff that I'm a very peaceful person, a very loving person, and what helped me in my life was traveling around the world. So that I learned other cultures, and I can deal with other cultures in all kinds of ways because I'm not afraid. And somebody brought up fear, and a lot of times we do fear each other because we don't know each other, and we don't take that time to know each other. And as far as, you know, I'm glad you said how many times they called the police to the golf course and found out that there were, how many times? Twice? Mm-hmm. And how many years have they been open?
Mm-hmm. Quite a while. Sandra, we'll go to you and then we'll go to you, Mike. Go ahead.
One of the things that I wanted to address was the fear comment. I think it's more than fear. I think it's hostility. I think it's entitlement. When you look at the various things, I mean, for the gentleman who was, I believe, a former aide to President Obama, who was moving into his building in New York, that some fear, and that's also that, what are you doing in my space? You don't belong here. You're not equal to me. There have been videos that I've been seeing since then of a gentleman going on a racist rant because he felt a black woman was taking too long to get out of a parking space. There is a video going on as well, another racist rant of a gentleman who is on MTA. I don't remember the state right now, the city, but that's a recent thing as well, of believe that the black women were talking too loud. So that is not fear. That is a hostility that is geared around entitlement of, you don't really belong here to occupy my space, and you are interfering with whatever it is that they believe their enjoyment is, and a lot of times it's not having to see or engage you in some way. And because they have to see or engage you where they believe, those particular type of people believe that you are less than them, that you don't qualify for them to have to address you, for them to have to wait for you to come out of a parking space, or wait for you in line, or wait for you anywhere, that makes them hostile and angry. And again, because the police have historically been the arm of the white person. They have been the enforcer, and especially against black people. So that's why they feel entitled, law violation or not, Title 18 violation or not, and I'm also an attorney, so I know what defined trespass is not, that they feel entitled and know and believe that these police are going to come at their call, and they're going to take action. And what have we learned over the course of years through Trayvon is when the businesses take the choice of calling police, they are risking for these people, these black people, arrest minimally, but also assault as a possibility, even leading to death. Why? Because that black person had the audacity to be asked to be treated the same as a white person when they are in a public building and are fee-paying people. And to say that you can't just simply ask me to leave when I had paid my money and you're open for the public. So these are conversations we're having, and I have had with local police chiefs. Westbrook Police Chief called me to say, what can we do? Because of these laws. That's why we've had conversations with the governor. That's why we had conversations with the senators from Vincent Hughes to Harris to Hayward, because of the fact that we can't allow these predominantly white businesses to deny black people the use of their business by using the police and by using the pretext of defiant trespass. Even though you're here in this public space and you're ready to pay me my fee, I don't want you here, so I'm going to say get out of my premises and use that law to racially discriminate. So that's where we need that change.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left on our broadcast tonight. I want to try to get in as many people as I can. So Mike, quick. Vince, quick. Trish, quick. Okay.
Number one, let me thank the
and Cammie, you too.
Thank the Patriot News for this, putting on this forum. I got to say, I came with an open mind, and my 1 to 12 is still good. But I got to tell you, and I mean this sincerely, and I feel terrible about the young lady who had to name her son Alexander, that she was that traumatized. But in the same breath, she talks about white privilege, the old code word, and, you know, quite frankly, I'm tired of that. Was it white privilege that my dad had to work 2 jobs? Was it white privilege that Asians that get rejected from colleges when somebody else lesser qualified gets in that college? It makes absolutely no sense to take the word of the week and throw that around with a broad brush, paint everybody the same, and with white privilege. I resent that, and I think it's incredibly naive to come out with something like that.
There's all kinds of books written on white privilege by white people. So if you go to Amazon.com.
No, I'm sorry, Amazon is fake.
Okay, before we get lost, before we get lost,
I don't want to hear. I'm just going by what I see. I don't need someone to explain it to me.
All right.
You tell me what it is.
Okay.
All right, hang on.
Okay.
Vincent, go ahead.
That comment about happy-go-lucky. I love God, and that's where my happiness goes. My happiness doesn't come from what white people or what black
I
people.
didn't call you happy-go-lucky. I said I was going around happy-go-lucky thinking everybody loved me. I wasn't talking about you.
Okay. Well, basically, being happy-go-lucky and Pollyanna is resented by some people in certain races because how dare you feel that way when I feel threatened? Okay, I know when I'm in the city, I feel threatened and it's terrible. There's danger there. There's crime. It's dangerous there. In Harrisburg, people get shot. So I use my economic ability through studying like crazy to go to a place where there are no shootings. So it's very simple. And when it comes to saying there's been no progress or there's hindrance to progress, just because a few people of majority do certain things, that doesn't mean that all white people are like that. Things have gone ahead, and people want to be given a little credit for loving their neighbor instead of being blamed for everything that happens that's terrible against people of a certain color, whether it's Hispanic, whether it's Irish, Jewish, or black American. We've got to love each other and try to be nice, try to be helpful as instead of trying to get our rights, just try to get along first and still work on the rights part. But if we were just more friendly to each other and accepting of people who they were as individuals and then deal with those people who are doing wrong as individuals.
Can I just say something?
Go right ahead.
When I talked about the church that I served, I said the church loved me. Most of the church, it was a few people in the homes that did not want me to come and give them communion. I did not say that whole church was against me or did not like me. I loved that church, and they loved me. There were a few people that were not able to come to church that did not want me to come to their home.
Speaking of you across the conversation.
And so I just want to clarify that because I don't want
And I think the
to
point she's
hear
trying
this.
and I think the point she's trying to make, Vincent, is that there are instances where some people, just by then of the fact that she's African American, they didn't want her to provide.
Nobody's denying that.
Well, no, that's all she was pointing out.
And everybody knows about racism, slavery,
So
and white
are you
privilege.
suggesting we shouldn't discuss it then? Because that's all she was just trying to point out.
Trish, you've been very patient.
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot of truth here today, and we've each grown up in our own world. And I don't know that in America that many of us believe that we can actually have a unified society. We've never seen a society where we can all benefit from cooperating and appreciating each other. And I don't think African Americans don't have to fight for the laws now. The laws are there. It's how we enact the laws and how people treat other people that's not being done properly, in my opinion. And I think what's happening is we don't talk about history. We don't teach about slavery. Yeah, we mentioned slavery and the slaves were freed, but do we talk about what happened to those African Americans after that? They did not have an easy time of it. They were still under the thumbs of white people. And thus the current economic state where we are, and I think a lot of it is based on economics, think a lot of it is based on generations and opinions being passed down through generations. I think we could start by educating our children as to the realistic, what happened after the Civil War and where are we now? I think that would be a good place to
Our
start.
children have received an indoctrination versus an education. They were indoctrinated into what white society has dictated for them to learn. There are gaps in history that are missing that. I am 51 years old and still have not known at all until just recently discovering this. Black history, every child learns about Martin Luther King, but there is so much more that white children, black children, Hispanics can benefit from the hidden history. It is hidden. There is so much that I never knew. And I think we need to really start with our children. We can have discussions here, but unless it starts at the dinner table, where are we in the next 10 years if we're still having this conversation?
The point of that is, most of that history is written by the white oppressors. And we don't want to acknowledge our sins, which have been very horrible. I spoke with a professor at William and Mary University who was giving a lecture at Williamsburg on African kings selling their own tribes and enemy tribes into slavery. And as I sat there, the horrors of slavery, and I'm thinking about it, and we all know so much about the Holocaust. We know a lot about the Holocaust. And my question to that professor was, why don't we talk about slavery in the same terms? To me, it was even far worse than the Holocaust, because in the Holocaust, they killed millions of Jews. In slavery, we extended that horror for generation after generation of slaves. His answer to me was, because it's our culture. It's the white Americans who did that. We can talk about the Germans and the Jews, but here, that's American history.
Mr. Mitchell.
John, I'm glad you brought up Sundays in church, because I think it's interesting because 80–90% of people say they're Christians, but the first rule of being a Christian is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But yet, Sunday after Sunday, people walk out of church, and they don't do that. They don't do that, whether it's because of someone's skin color or their size or their gender or whatever. They think that gives them liberty to treat them differently. And the other thing I wanted to mention about history is first learning your own history. I'm the grandson of Ephraim Slaughter. Ephraim Slaughter was a slave who ran away to become the U.S. colored troop. So it helps to know your own history. I have a responsibility to carry on his legacy. He went to Gettysburg when Abraham Lincoln spoke, but he wasn't allowed on the stage because he was black. So it goes on. All of us have this cross to bear. Monday, I was stopped by Lower Paxton Police. He said, "Sir, are you distracted?" I said, "No." He said, "You crossed the double line." I said, "I was avoiding a pothole." He gave me a warning. Was that because I was black?
What, then he stopped you?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
I mean,
He might have stopped because you were swerving.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, I think that one of the things that Pastor Joel has said, as far as if we want to make change and want to make positive change, it's very important that we listen. And one of the barriers that I see that change in trying to get over this hurdle of racism is we have people who are black and say that this did not happen to me, therefore it doesn't exist. And then they'll be used as examples by white people who want to be deniers to say, well, this black person says racism doesn't exist, so therefore it must not. Then we also have white people who say, well, I personally am not a racist, therefore it must not exist. So that's where we have to take that personal out and listen to the experiences of a community and stop saying, well, since it didn't affect me, because there's a lot of things that haven't affected me and I have not done, but I can recognize when it has occurred or hurt someone else, that I can still empathize and try to look for change, you know. So I think that's another factor and key to moving past this, is that we stop being used as an excuse and we stop making excuses, and then let's get together and talk about people's experiences, and then let's see how we can just make those experiences better, or even have understanding by, well, I didn't mean to make you feel that way, but this is what I really meant when I said this, and that's how you get understanding, versus getting in your stronghold and saying, I didn't do that, therefore it didn't happen. So that's how it can be positive change, and for each one of us doing that, then it can be better as a community.
Mark, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank PennLive for putting on this forum. And I've heard lots of voices and views tonight on this issue, but I leave more skeptical than ever that we're ever going to get beyond racism, because I've heard that white privilege is endemic and inherent, that whites are inherently racist. So if we whites here and all across America are inherently, endemically racist, we're never going to get beyond our racism. So we are condemned to live in a racist society here in America.
As co-moderator, that's a good summary, but I don't think that's what the conclusion that was raised. I don't know how you got to that point.
That's my conclusion.
Well, that's not what you
That's one of those things
conclude. That's not what was stated. That's not, now, let me just.
Actually, I want to go to Cammie really quick. Go ahead.
Okay, then I do have a
I just
comment.
wanted to say, not all black people are racist, not all white people are racist.
That's right.
However,
Who's right?
both races are stereotypical of each other. Growing up, I went to a private Catholic school. My mother was white, my father was black. He was in the military, respectable black man. There were times when my mother couldn't go into a restaurant with us because she was white in Louisiana. And there were times my father could take us, but my mother couldn't go. So I've grown up, now I've been in law enforcement. I worked in our Pennsylvania prison system. And I'm here to tell you what, when somebody's yelling and the rude things that they do, it's not a race issue. Because I come up on that having not felt black enough to sit with African Americans getting looked at, and not being white enough to date your white son. I married a white man. And his grandmother said, oh honey, you can come to church with us. There's other colored people there.
What America is dealing with, it's not the race, it's a heart problem.
Yeah,
it comes back to a heart problem. You know, until we're able to look at our own experience and recognize that we're human beings walking in a multitude of different experiences and bodies, and bringing it back to that place and willing to extend that kindness and that recognition that we're all trying to find our way home, whatever that means. It's a hard problem.
Carla, go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely take a lot from what you said about that it can be a hopeless feeling, that this is such a deep-rooted problem, it is so pervasive. How businesses are, how our schools are teaching our children, and that they're not receiving a history that's equally representational of all the students that are actually in those schools. But I think the hopeful part of this, and where I would disagree respectfully with your assessment, is that we do have a racist society. We do. We have a society that has been built on the oppression of black people, has been built on the oppression of immigrants. It has been built on having certain different groups of people with unequal rights. But where we falter is when we make our enemies people and not systems. People can work together to change systems. We can work together, white, black, Hispanic, every race, to change our school district and make it better. We can all recognize that there's problems in how our government works, how our church works. If we make the enemy an oppressive system, that's not personal, it's not an attack, it's just that we set this up the wrong way, and now we need to fix it. But we do have to start by saying, I'm willing to listen to the experiences of other people that are different than mine and believe them. It's not up to a rape victim to prove what happened, what we assume her guilt, because she probably caused it. It's not up to us to assume that a black person probably deserved getting the police called on them. We have to start listening to people's different experiences and saying, we are willing to take your word and your experience as reality, even if it's different from our experience. How can we create a system where everyone feels safe?
Country is so bad that that's why the whole world wants to come here.
I go back to say, what you said, I somewhat disagree with. Our experiences color our views. Okay? And with those, when we let our experiences color our views, we're putting blinders on a certain, but we're not open to listen. No
Would you like to speak?
Basically saying
Please come up.
all white people are racist. All people, or anybody's racist. It's the experiences of black men that we have.
We're gonna have to. I want
okay, another night. I would go back and say, you know,
okay.
Again, our experiences color our approach and our view.
All right. You know what? I think this is a great. We are now officially out of time, but I think this we have probably the best way to end tonight's session. If we're ever gonna get this right, it's gonna start with my kids, your kids, our kids, and this young lady, Jasmine, has something she wants to share.
So I know that since I was little that I didn't want to see black and white as two different races. I always wanted to see, like, when my parents would ask, okay, is that black or white? I would just not want to answer because I'm like, I don't want to be someone as a race, I want to be them as them. But then I remember that I first watched and I saw in my own eyes I went into the mall and I saw someone clutch their purse. And I wondered, what is a 12-year-old going to do to your purse? And I remember telling my mom, and she said, you're going to see it a lot more. And that stuck with me. Then this year, last school year, I had moved to York Country Day. And it was completely different being a predominantly white school. And I didn't know what to expect. I was scared, I was nervous, but I didn't show it. And I remember being very shy and I probably last year wouldn't even want to come up here. But I remember that what made me break out of my shell is when there were a few kids who decided to call me the N-word. And I've heard other people being called it in the locker area. And it made me notice that I can't just watch it, but I need to take a stand. And I need to stand up for myself. So I remember that I would go up to him and I would say, hey, this isn't cool, and you need to learn that there's a history behind it, and that you don't need to do this. And they were still being called that, so I decided to tell my mom, and when I told her, they took it to the head of school. At first, the head of school just said, okay, we'll talk to their parents. I don't recall parents being talked to, and I remember that it still happened. And in the art class, people started to notice that I actually started to stand up for myself, so they started to call me intimidating. And I would wonder why I was being called these words, and they said, because maybe if you were less intimidating, I'm probably the least intimidating person to me, because I will run if I see a spider. So I was like, intimidating, how? But then I noticed that they were just scared that I was speaking up for myself and actually learning to have a voice at such a young age. So I learned that sometimes you have to keep fighting for what you want to actually be able to get what you want. So I learned that we kept going back to the head of school, and there was something done. We met with the students, and me and my friend Winter, who was a good friend of mine, we stood up for ourselves. Winter is half white and half black, and she has learned that she has seen both sides. If she would be with her dad, she would be treated differently than if she was with her mom. So I just learned to stand up for myself, and I know that in history people are like, you don't really show much interest in stuff like the Cold War or World War II. And I just tell them, because I hear about this stuff every day, and I'm tired of hearing about it, I want to hear about something like the Civil Rights Movement. And I want to hear about slavery. I want to go to museums about African American lives. And then when I get excited about the civil rights movement, like today, we were in history, and they were like, okay, we're starting the civil rights movement. And I was so excited. People were like, why are you so excited? I'm like, I actually get to learn about my race. And then I looked through the book. It's about 20 pages all about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. And I've learned about these two people since I was in first grade, and I am tired of it. I'm like, there's other people that had to have done this movement because these two people couldn't have carried a whole movement by themselves. So I've had to search on my own to learn other than Christopher Columbus, the World War II. I've had to learn all of this stuff on my own. And honestly, I'm just tired of it. And also, there's a quote that stuck with me. It was in a book that we had read this year called Animal Farm, and it's animals that portray humans around Russia and communists and socialism. And so it says, all animals are equal, but some animals more equal than others. That reminds me of our Constitution. Our Constitution says that we are all equal and that we all have the same rights, but then you break it down to our history, we don't all have the same rights. We may be under the same law, but when you look at it, all of us in this room have different rights that our judicial system uses differently if they see you walk into a room.
All right. Thank you, Jasmine. That is all the time we have for this evening. If we haven't walked a mile in each other's shoes tonight, hopefully you've walked a few feet at least anyway. I'm PennLive opinion editor John Micek. I'd like to thank Joe Robinson for joining us. I'd like to thank our panel for joining us. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Are we going to do this again?
It'd be nice to. It'd be good. It would be nice to.